TFT will never go back to what it used to be. Those were really simple times with simple abilities like Jin. Back in set 3, Jin's 4th auto would just do more damage. But the thing is, Jin has been a 4 cost in numerous sets, like set 6 where his ability summoned a sniper rifle, or set 8 where his 4th auto would always hit the lowest health unit and have its damage reduced by how many targets it pierces, and now in set 10, Jin is a 5 cost unit where he summons violins that take up bench slots, fire at a fixed rate, and deal increased damage every 4th shot. So clearly, over time, abilities have become more and more complicated even when they're for the same cost unit. Now, actually, I think that's a good thing, and this may be a hot take, but honestly, after playing the revival, I'm glad TFT has come so far, because my god, there's so many problems with set 3, like support units, 3-hex range carries, blitzcrank, and so on. But what are the other glaring problems with set 3? Why is the simplicity of set 3 actually quite detrimental? And in turn, why is this power creep actually healthy for TFT? But before we get into that, I wanted to address some of the allegations that have been coming my way recently. I will clarify now that I am not 40 years old. At least not yet. But with that, let's get into the video. So let's start off by talking about the power creep. As I mentioned, Jin has been a 4 cost several times in TFT, but each successive time his ability crept up significantly in power. Why? Why is that the case? Well, that's because player expectations have grown with each set of TFT. The TFT team get better and more ambitious with each set they make, and the next set will revolutionize the game, surprise the player base, who in turn get accustomed to this level of innovation, and in turn grow their expectations for more ingenuity in successive sets. And you can actually see the same power creep with other units like Ziggs. Initially, in set 3, Ziggs was just single target magic damage, but over time he gained a scaling trait, and his ult became multi-target, even when he remained as a 1-cost unit. But what's interesting is that this isn't exactly true for tanks, and we can see that through Nico, who's been a tank in set 3, 7, 9, and 10, mostly as a 3-cost unit. After all these years, Nico will still generally do the same thing, which is just ult and gain a shield. So while there are numerous unique and exciting ways for units to deal damage, there isn't really an exciting way for a tank to receive that damage. So the shapes of carry abilities have crept up in power to exceed player expectations and beat what the TFT team has done in the past. And that brings me to another huge point about TFT you probably don't realize, but TFT is its own competitor. Each set of TFT is always compared to each other, and the devs are always on their toes trying to beat what they've done in the past. And if you're a TFT player, this is a good thing, because TFT will always be exciting and interesting because they have to keep on one-upping themselves, which conversely means that despite TFT having a monopoly on the auto battler genre, they cannot become stagnant, and they have to keep on innovating. Of course, simplicity isn't directly bad because units still need to be understandable, but those units need to have many permutations and combinations because players love that. You can easily prove this by looking at the wild success of augments. While the augments themselves can be simple, their combinations with traits, portals, and augments are not. The simplicity needs to be in the presentation and not the possibility. And once you achieve that, you have a fantastic mechanic, like augments. But augments are back in set 3, so what's the problem with set 3? Well, firstly there's a lot of cringe in set 3, like the existence of blitzcrank who pulls in your corner units at the beginning of every round. It's been so long since we've had something like this in TFT, and my god, I do not miss this at all. I forgot how frustrating and annoying blitz was, and this set is reminding me of those days, and I do not want to go back. But there are other units like Karma who are also cringe, but in a different sense. Karma is a fully supportive unit, and in turn you never itemize her whatsoever. Her entire role is to enable traits and support a unit whoever she's shielding. Now this is cringe because it's so boring and bland, and there's not really any depth to playing Karma because you just field her if you can and an adjacent unit just reaps the benefits. But on the opposite side of the spectrum, there's units that have way too much depth, like Syndra. I didn't know this initially, but there's an interaction with Syndra where her ult includes the orbs from other Syndras you're playing or even the enemy Syndra. Shout out to Alan for letting me know because I did not know this interaction existed, and it's actually absurd. Now this is especially insane in the revival because portals and augments allow you to play multiple Syndras, like if you get the augment Twin Terror. Which of course means that if it wasn't for portals and augments, interactions like this wouldn't be that common in TFT. But that's not to say I'm not a fan of the augments and portals that are coming back to set 3. I'm actually a huge fan because they bring so many more new and interesting ways to play it. Which is funny I say that now because here's my initial reaction from a week ago. Personally wanted the old items back, the old interactions and that sort of stuff, so I could relive how broken it was back then and actually have that nostalgic feeling, right? I would rather play a literal copy and paste of set 3 from like patch 9.2 or whatever it was, than play like this remastered version of set 3 that just isn't the same. But what I will say now after playing more set 3 is that I could not be more wrong. Sure, the old items were cool and had some interesting interactions, but those interactions were heavily favoured to blasters, so I'm glad they're not back. The current item system is definitely better. Also, even though the difference is subtle, I'm glad Brawler no longer gives flat HP anymore. Even at 1 star, 4 Brawlers get so much HP and it's so annoying to play into that in the early game. Which brings up another problem, and that is the shape and structure of the traits back then were just too simple and bland. If we compare Brawler to Bruiser and Sorcerer to Spellweaver, the set 10 variants are vastly superior because they enable more possibilities and fantasies since they can scale through other traits and augments. For example, these traits pair and interact far better with augments like Cybernetic Bulk and Cybernetic Uplink than their older variants. As I mentioned earlier, the trait itself can be simple, but its possibilities should not be. And this issue is common in set 3 because back then emblems were not a thing. So if their spat isn't craftable, then it wasn't obtainable even through a tome of traits. So this does add to how shallow those traits were. But what's incredibly frustrating in set 3 is how some units have completely random targeting, which feels incredibly awful to both play and play against because it only feels amazing or awful solely depending if the main carry was hit. Random targeting is so unreliable and inconsistent, and it actually just feels so bad, honestly. Equally as bad as you carry only having 3 hex range, walking up, and then being in range of so many AoE damage or CC abilities, which of course means they get completely obliterated. Speaking of, there's also a huge amount of CC in this set in both the early game and the late game, which is just generally a huge nuisance. But overall, these problems make set 3 feel very linear and bland compared to set 10, which doesn't have any of these problems. And now that I'm playing set 3 again, I'm no longer looking back at the set with nostalgia or rose-tinted glasses, and I'm starting to realise how bad it actually was in the past. I do still enjoy it, don't get me wrong, but with how far TFT has come since, I don't think I could enjoy set 3 if it was released as like set 11 or something. So honestly, I've got to say I'm really impressed with the TFT team. They've continued innovating the game despite having a monopoly, and it doesn't look like they'll stop anytime soon. So if you're working or you worked on the game, thank you, and here's to more to come. Speaking of, I was slightly wrong about when set 11 will be with us. It should come to the PBE around the 5th or 6th of March. I was off by a patch and it will be 6 weeks, not a month. But yeah, with that I will end the video and pass over some questions to you guys. What do you think about set 3's revival? Did you play set 3 back in 2020, or is this your first time seeing this set? Are you enjoying the revival, or are you also feeling the same issues I did? Let me know in the comments, and remember to subscribe. Anyway, check out these other videos if you want to see more from me, and as always, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.